Okay, so before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I'm on the land of the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Um, and so, yeah, I'm really glad you could all join. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. Um, and we're going to actually start with a little meditation. So, if you can make your way to a comfortable meditation posture, we'll do a short practice first, then I'll talk a bit, and then we'll do a longer practice later on. So, coming into a comfortable meditation posture, and you might like to, change how you're sitting, get any extra props, get comfortable, and then finding that sense of balance, that sense of steadiness, that sense of poise that comes from your meditation posture, the position that works for you. And this first practice will be maybe 15 minutes long. And so I want you to see if you can be still and be quiet for this time, just seeing what is possible, seeing if you can find that sense of stillness and the associated peacefulness that comes from that stillness. Now, landing in the present moment, first of all, noticing any sounds that you can hear. I can hear sounds of cars, the hum of my computer. I'd like you to just notice whatever sounds you can hear. Whenever you notice a sound, just give it a mental label using the word hear for whenever you hear a sound. And these mental labels are just a support, help guide your focus to be able to acknowledge what your sensory experience is and then allow it to be let go of. Noticing any sounds you can hear and giving it that silent mental label of hear. And then moving to the sensations of the body, noticing whatever you can feel right now in your body. I can feel the sensations in my hands, the sensations of my butt on the cushion, just resting on this chair. And just noticing whatever body sensations are present for you. And whenever your attention lands on a body sensation, you can use the label feel. Saying the word feel in your head in a gentle and equanimous voice. And here you might find that you notice different things and attention moves around. That's perfectly fine. You might also notice the same body sensations. Maybe you notice the breath or that feeling of being supported. And if you notice the same thing, you can just relabel, say the label multiple times if that's what your attention is on. And now we'll also include internal sensations. So, noticing if there are thoughts present, whether those thoughts are images or sounds. And if the thoughts are in the form of images, you're remembering a scene, picturing something in the future, just observe that clearly with mindfulness. And you can use the label see anytime you see a mental image. If you notice that there are thoughts present that are in the form of sound or mental talk, perhaps there's an internal dialogue, then you can use the label hear. And you might notice that when you look for thoughts, there aren't any. And that's perfectly fine. If that happens, you can either just enjoy that restfulness or notice body sensations, notice external sounds. And perhaps you notice that there's actually a lot of activity, and that's no problem either. Anytime you get caught up or pulled away, when you realize what's going on, when you have that moment of awareness, simply try to notice what it is. What is that thought? What is that distraction? Is it something you see, hear, or feel. And just give it a label. Come back to being present, being mindful, monitoring the content of the sense doors. Good. And for the last couple of minutes of this meditation, I'd just like you to open up to whatever is present. So, noticing whatever experience is present for you in that moment and giving it a label of either see, hear, or feel. And so, noticing as well that we can divide up all of our sensory experience into one of these three categories. As long as we maybe combine tastes and smells, that's probably in the feel category. And we can apply see, hear, and feel to anything internal, any mental phenomena, and also emotions. So just noticing the whole of your experience, whatever is present, and seeing how it fits into one of these categories. You can give it one of these labels. Nice work, everyone. Take a minute to slowly come out of the meditation. Might like to stretch, move around a little bit. And hopefully that felt like it was helpful. Hopefully it cultivated some calm, some clarity, some present moment awareness, this quality of mindfulness, and maybe even a little equanimity. Okay, so I'm pretty excited to give this talk. So if you read the description, I'm going to be talking about one of my first Dharma experiences. At least looking back, that's how I conceive of it. And this was when I got taken to see the movie The Matrix in 1999 when it first came out. So in this talk, I'm actually going to be discussing emptiness and talking about some, kind of deep Dharma concepts. So the first thing I wanted to say is that sometimes talk of emptiness can lead to feelings of disconnection or even dissociation, or it might bring up uncomfortable feelings that could feel even like strong emotions, might even feel overwhelming. So I just wanted to sort of say ahead of time, if you are feeling this, feel free to, indicate so, or tune out for a bit, stand up, feel your feet. If at any point after the talk it feels uncomfortable, please get in contact with me. There's certain things that can happen when hearing this stuff that can usually be talked through pretty easily. So this is just to sort of, I don't think this will happen to anybody, but I like to give this warning just in case. Sometimes these concepts can be a little uncomfortable, as I experienced when I was 11 years old, watching Keanu fight the bad guys. I also experienced some of this feeling. Okay, so so what I wanted to talk about, essentially my family, so my dad is Chinese Malaysian, and his family are like culturally Buddhist. So we would occasionally go to the Buddhist monastery. My grandparents' ashes are at the monastery in Perth. We'd visit there like once or twice a year. Maybe we'd bring some food and offer some dana to the monks when they come around with their bowls. But when I was young, I didn't really learn about any Buddhist concepts. So the background here is that I had heard a bit about Buddhism, but I didn't really understand any of the ideas in it. No one had talked to me about that. And I did get shown how to meditate at some point, but I only used it to fall asleep, seeing as that's what seemed to happen to me every time I tried it. So I'm going to be talking about the movie The Matrix. I thought maybe I needed to give a spoiler alert, but given that it's 24 years old, if you don't know already, I think it's too late. So anyway, when I was 11 and this movie came out, my dad took me to see it. We were both very excited. It had Keanu in the lead role, obviously very exciting. Particularly exciting for me as someone who is half Chinese Malaysian and half Australian. To see a like lead actor who was part Asian was pretty amazing. And I obviously loved the fighting and the the sci-fi aspects of it. But the thing that stuck with me after I saw the film was that I couldn't shake this feeling of like, what if everyone around me was a computer simulation? So in the film, and I'm mostly just referring to that main premise of the film, particularly in the early part of the film. This premise that what if you look around and the world that you're in doesn't feel quite right? It feels off in some sense. What if it was actually a world that had been fabricated. It had been created. It was somewhat illusory. And what if actually you couldn't discern reality from fiction? You couldn't discern illusion from what was true, what was real. And so, that sort of idea is in that film. And then obviously Neo, Keanu, gets pulled out of the Matrix, and it goes into more the sci-fi aspects. But what stuck with me after seeing it was that I kind of looked around at the people in my life and I thought, okay, what if they are computer simulations? What if they are computer programs? If they were, and I asked them if they were a computer simulation, they would tell me that they're not. And if they weren't a simulation, if they were a human being, they would also tell me that they weren't. So I couldn't use that as a measure of truth. I had to look for something else that would tell me if the people around me weren't computer simulations or not. And so, so I saw the film twice actually, and I think it was because I'd seen it a second time, the idea really stuck with me. And so if you can imagine 11-year-old me, at the end of primary school, trying to, I don't know what I was doing, watching Pokemon and then hanging out with my friends, doing stuff around the house. And then suddenly in my world, there was just this feeling of like, what if everyone is a artificial intelligence agent? And so what I found here was that, and I think this idea, like we can actually appreciate this more now, now that we have Chat GPT, we have this next wave of AI systems. It's pretty evident that computers and AIs can generate content, generate text, even generate video, images, sounds that are effectively on par with what gets created by humans. So we can appreciate this even more now from that perspective. So at the time, what I was looking for was, can I find some proof that the people around me actually existed in the sense of being a human being? Did they have some quality that distinguished them, that told me that they're definitely not a computer program? And I looked and looked and looked, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find anything at all. There was nothing in my sensory experience that would tell me with any certainty that when I looked at another person, they weren't a computer simulation. And I think this is actually, in a way, the correct conclusion that I made as an 11-year-old. What happened after that was really interesting, though. So it was a bit disorienting at the time, a bit destabilizing. I think I still did pretty normal things. I still got along, went to school, all of that stuff, went and played badminton, that kind of thing. But it was still a bit disorienting. It kind of bothered me a bit. What happened next was really interesting. I thought to myself, this feels bad to imagine that everyone else is a computer program. But before, I was just picturing everyone else as existing, in the sense of being a human that was, had wholesome intentions. And nothing changed except for seeing that movie and introducing that concept. Nothing changed except my relationship to what was going on. My parents were still doing the same things. My friends were still doing the same things. And so that realization made me think, well, what if I just actually go back to how it was before? Like I just shift my way of looking there to be, okay, well, I don't know what people are. I don't know if they're computer simulations or if they're real, but I'm actually just going to choose to act as if they are human beings, act as if they have some kind of human qualities to them. And I'm going to act that way and I'm going to look at them that way. And what happened was things got better. I felt a lot better. It felt actually like quite a relief. And so I think this is actually the reason why I think this is a great Dharma lesson is that it kind of showed me at this young age the malleability of perception, that we are creating our existence, we're creating our world, we're creating our experience through how we choose to look at things. And how we choose to look at them, sometimes it's a conscious choice. We pick a way of looking at things. Other times it's more unconscious. It's just the conditioning, it's the concepts, it's the way of relating that's at play. But there's always some way of looking. And the way of looking changes what our experience is. It changes how we feel about that experience. So the other reason this is a great Dharma lesson is that there's this concept. Hang on, let me rephrase that. One of the key insights of Buddhism is that phenomena, experiences, and people are empty. So this is found in early Buddhism, in the Pali Canon, but it's more emphasized in the later Buddhist traditions, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, and Dzogchen and Mahamudra. And emptiness means that objects, phenomena, experiences, people, myself, all of these things lack inherent existence. They don't exist permanently in an unchanging way, in a way that's fixed or solid or stable. And they don't exist in a way that's independent from causes and conditions. And so one way to think about this is like, well, I need to breathe air. If I stop breathing, then I stop living. And if we were to draw a line there, normally if I say me versus the air, there's a pretty clear boundary line there. But if we were to actually think about that, that boundary is not so fixed, right? There's a certain dependence that my cells have on oxygen that needs to come from external to me. So there's a sense of connectedness there and a sense of interdependence. And we see this, so emptiness is, it's said that, all experiences, all phenomena, all beings, all objects are empty of inherent existence. Another way we could say this is that they're full of the causes and conditions. And so the image that gets used in the sutras of the later tradition is like, in a grain of rice, there's the whole universe. The whole universe goes into conditions that one grain of rice to be that way in that moment. I think this is a beautiful analogy. The other image that gets used is Indra's net, which is this net, but of mirrors. So there's all these little points in this, if you can imagine like a net, but at each point where the thread joins, there's a mirror, and the mirrors reflect all the other points. And that's sort of what we're looking at. When we see a person, we're not seeing their inherent existence. We're seeing a reflection of all the causes and conditions that have gone into their life, into the way they are in that moment. And so I think this is what I got a little taste of when I started looking at people and wondering whether they were real in the sense of whether they were a human being or whether they were a computer simulation. I started to see that they weren't necessarily, they didn't necessarily have inherent existence. I couldn't see that. I couldn't find it, no matter how hard I searched. And so I think what happened to me then, it would have been helpful if I'd had a teacher or, a tradition or a system or a sangha, but I didn't. And I was seeing this emptiness of other beings. I think what would have actually been really helpful is to see the emptiness of myself, to see the emptiness of the self. And so this is a point that's really emphasized in the Buddhist traditions, that we can look for this quality of no self or not self, that the experiences we have, and particularly the experiences we have that we normally attribute to ourselves, actually lack this inherent existence. They can't be said to truly be a self. And of course, it still feels like we are selves, and that sense of self will keep being there, even when we are, highly awakened. But the sense of self is something that arises because of causes and conditions. It's impermanent, and it doesn't last. It's not fixed. So that sense of self will keep arising, but the goal here is to keep seeing that it is empty, keep seeing that it is not as solid as it might initially seem. So I guess I wanted to just talk a little bit more about this, and then do another practice. There's a few things that this ties into that I just want to touch on to expand a little bit. The reason that emptiness is considered so important in the Buddhist tradition is this idea of delusion or ignorance. So according to Buddhist philosophy, and also, teachers, practitioners, the correlation here is that we misunderstand our reality, we misunderstand our experience. And because we have this fundamental delusion of misunderstanding, this is why we suffer. And so I just want to flesh this out a little bit. It said that as we experience the world, as we go through and take in sensory experiences, this misunderstanding is built up. And this misunderstanding is that we take things as inherently existing. We take them as permanent. We take them as unchanging. And we also don't recognize the role that the mind has in this. So any experience we are having, any experience that I am having, not only is that experience empty. So let's say right now I'm looking at my lamp. Not only is the lamp empty, the light coming from the lamp is empty, but also the lamp and the light require me looking at it, require me conceiving of it, having it be in my mind in some sense. And this particularly is the thing that seems to make a difference. Understanding that we are involved, our mind is involved in creating that experience. At least, and I think this is quite easy to understand, that there are times in our life when we can look at things a certain way, and particular experiences feel different from how they felt at other times. One example of this is, I quite like to cook. Sometimes I'll cook for friends, and I'll make a huge meal with like 8 different dishes, and I'll be slaving away in the kitchen, and it'll feel pretty good. I kind of like it. But then other times I'm just hungry, I'm tired, I'm trying to make instant noodles, and it feels terrible. The physical actions are the same. I'm in the kitchen, I'm doing things. What's different is the way my mind is interpreting it. And I think at least some degree of that is available to us pretty easily. So what's going on is that the mind is involved in each experience, and we don't recognize how we are creating those experiences. We don't recognize that those experiences are dependent on the mind. And so when we don't realize that, we cling to those experiences. There's some degree of craving involved, or perhaps aversion. These are two sides of the same coin. Wanting things to be a certain way, basically by either trying to grab onto experiences or trying to push them away. So that's the craving movement of grabbing on, the aversive movement of pushing away. And it's said that the more we understand emptiness, and to any degree that we can understand emptiness, we will have a commensurate reduction in suffering. And so this is the idea here, that if we can understand this, it leads to profound freedom. It leads to profound relief. It leads to that release from craving and clinging, and release from suffering. I want to talk a little bit about some of the where this actually occurs in the Buddhist texts. So there's a sutta called the Bahya Sutta. Some of you might know this. It's quite popular, quite famous. Essentially, there's someone named Bahya of the bark cloth. And apparently this was, he was a pretty good guy, but he wasn't awakened. And he realized that at some point. He wasn't awakened, he wasn't an arhat, and he wasn't on the path to it. And he went to see the Buddha, and he asked the Buddha, okay, teach me the Dharma, and please, you got to do it quickly. I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I don't know how long you're going to live. So quick, give me the shortcut. Give me the Dharma as quick as you can. We need to speed run this thing. And so what the Buddha says to him, I'm actually just going to read this section. It's just one paragraph, and it's some great instructions. The Buddha says to Bahya, you should train yourself thus. In reference to the seen, there will be only the seen. In reference to the heard, only the heard. In reference to the sensed, only the sensed. In reference to the cognized, only the cognized. That is how you should train yourself. When for you, there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the cognized in reference to the cognized, then, Bahya, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor yonder, nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of dukkha. And so what is being said there is that there are these sense doors, there are sense experiences, and anytime there is a sense experience, we attribute a self that is experiencing that. When we see something, we attribute a seer to that. And what it's saying here is that when we see something, we should not identify with that seeing, or we should see through that sense of self. We should see that the sense of self arises in conjunction with the seeing. So when there is the seen, there's only the seen. There's just this process happening of seeing. There doesn't need to be a something out there that is seen and something in here that is doing the seeing. And so what we can do here, if we were to apply this instruction, we'll go back to the meditation we did earlier. We can practice looking to see if we can find any example of solidity, if we can find any sense of self, if we can find the seer, if we can find the doer, if we can find the hearer, and if we can see this enough times, then that can lead to this deeper understanding, this understanding of the way that these experiences are, the way the phenomena are, the way that reality is in some sense. So let's go into a meditation now. If you want to change how you're sitting, go for it. And so just take a minute here. We've already covered a lot. So I'd like you to just see how that feels for you. See how that's landing. What do you feel in the body in particular? What's your mind state here? And how has that felt? Do you feel any emotions? Noticing for yourself, maybe this teaching feels, maybe this concept of emptiness, maybe it feels kind of exciting. Maybe it feels motivating or inspiring. Maybe it feels boring. Maybe you feel averse to it. Maybe it even brings up sort of negative emotions. Might be a feeling of, oh, this isn't for me, or I'm not there yet. Just noticing and acknowledging whatever reactions you have to this teaching. Just allowing whatever is there to be there. And then just seeing if it's possible to try out this practice patiently and diligently, exploring what is possible, putting aside any reservations and just giving it a go. And so now I'd like you to come into the present moment. Noticing what sensations make up your present moment experience. And particularly, seeing if you can clearly discern whether an experience is something you see, something you hear, or something you feel. And so seeing can be external. Perhaps you see light through the eyelids, or it can be internal, seeing mental images. What you hear can be external sounds or internal mental talk or mental sound. And what you feel includes body sensations and also any internal sensations, emotions, feelings deeper in the body. I'd just like you to notice for a few minutes whatever is present for you. You can use the labels if that feels helpful, just to clearly discern, acknowledge, and let go of whatever is present. Good. Now, what I'd like you to focus on is the sense of self. What in your experience feels like you? And there's some common sensations that we associate more with feeling like us. Perhaps, you know, the feeling of the body sensations of the head, the internal dialogue, the images that we see, and also the emotions that we feel. I'd like you just look for what feels like you and see each of those. Try to discern whether they are something you see, hear, or feel, and see if it's possible to find anything that is outside of what is seen, heard, or felt? Good. Now I'd like you to look for where it feels like you are located. Where does it feel like your perceptions come from? And see if you can find this in the body, in space. And for the final part of this meditation, I'd like you to drop all doing. Let go of looking, let go of observing. Just rest. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, no problem to solve. Just fully let go. Nice work, everyone. Take a minute to slowly come out of the meditation. So, I hope that was interesting or useful or different. Um, with these practices, um, it's not necessarily about it clicking the first time. Sometimes it takes repetition. Maybe it takes just practice, step by step, and the intention to look, to investigate closely over time is what seems to cause these shifts, create this different understanding. And I just want to finish off here just by reading a bit of another sutta, or referencing another sutta. And this is the Pena Sutta, or the Foam Sutta. So this is again from the Pali Canon. This is the words of the Buddha. And the Buddha is talking here about these different experiences that, if you look at closely, you would be able to say that they're empty, void, without substance. And so the first thing there's a series of analogies here. So the first analogy is foam floating down the river. He says that if someone with good eyesight were to see it, observe it, and appropriately examine it, it would appear empty, void, without substance. For what substance would there be in a glob of foam? And in the same way, there is no substance in form, in the sensations of the body, in forms, objects of the world. And so then he talks about a water bubble and compares it to feeling, or Vedana, the feeling tone. And then a mirage, comparing this with perceptions. Then a banana tree, which I had to look this up. Apparently banana trees are hollow inside. So it's empty, void, without substance. The Buddha compares this to mental formations. And then finally, there's a magician doing a magic trick. And if someone were to look at it closely, examine it, observe it, if they looked at it very closely, they would see that it's void, empty, without substance. And just so, in the same way, you can examine consciousness and see that it is empty, void, without substance. And if you do this, you can let go of the clinging, let go of the attachment to these different aggregates of experience. Okay, I've talked a lot. Let's hear from you. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions, comments? Would anyone like to share anything? I'm really curious as to how this is all feeling, how this is landing for you. Frank.
Kynan, thank you very much. That was a brilliant and very, very useful talk. You've done really fantastic, really well.
Thank you.
Oh, it was brilliant. The story of Bahia, if I can add just one thing, Bahia was a rich merchant, and the ship he was traveling on with his goods ran on a rock, and he ended up on the shore without anything. And when he had the instruction from the Buddha, he started practicing. And in a very short time, a runaway cow killed him. And the monks asked the Buddha, "What happened to Bahia, Lord? How did he finish?" And the Buddha said, "Don't worry about Bahia, monks. He was on the right way, and he done well." So I've been a Buddhist for a very long time, but I forget things. I'm getting old. And like when my wife tells me off, and it's I think unjust, then I come up straight away. Like one day, we've been married 61 years. She told me that I do not keep her in very high regard, which is untrue. So I was watching myself. What happens there in my mind, in my heart? It's untrue completely. And I was very happy that I didn't get angry, because if you get angry, Santiveda said that you destroy all your good karma if you get angry. And it's very true. And she told me that I'm a selfish person, because in the morning, when we get up, I do walking meditation. She watches the news, which is terrible. It's a dreadful thing to keep watching the news every day, all the repeats. But because I watch my behavior, I try to meditate, even if I'm over 80 now. She calls me selfish. Again, I tell myself, there's no one to get upset. If it's true, if she thinks like that, it's her problem. I do the walking meditation in the morning. And then she thinks that I'm selfish because I'm watching myself. So if you want to get enlightened, and if you're married, you have extra burden and extra things to deal with. So thanks again, and we have to practice this. And I only had one experience with anatta through walking meditation. In the Buddhist monastery, Wise Man's Ferry, after 2 hours, I was experiencing the earth, the heaviness of the body, the water, the air. I was practically like a ship going from side to side on the waves. So the body certainly is not me, because I experience the four elements. But the mind needs much more practice, and not to forget this teaching, what you've done today. Thanks very much, Kynan.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else have any thoughts or reflections or questions? Richard.
Hi, Kynan. Yes, thank you for that. Of course, curious if you're going to be talking about The Matrix. It's a great movie. I'm interested in the idea that emptiness is not that things don't exist out there. Like, I'm seeing people on the screen now that I know exist, but it's just that my experience of it is as a mental construction. Is that the way to view it?
Yeah. So the way I think about this, in the Heart Sutra, it says form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And this just sounds like a paradox. And it might actually be fine to just treat it as a paradox. So what we do know is that our mind is basically hallucinating our experience. There seems to be some kind of inputs to the system, but what we're observing is that fabricated reality. Whether or not there is actually a reality out there, we don't know for sure. What we can do, though, is we can infer that it does seem like there is a reality. Things are pretty consistent. You know, we talk pretty often, Richard, and you're pretty consistently the same. Or, you know, you're in the same room. You have some similar qualities. It seems like, from my perspective, it seems like there is at least an external world that is consistent. I can't know that for sure, though. So I think this is one of the times where you want to use the appropriate lens, the appropriate way of looking. You know, when you are driving a car, the appropriate lens is that all the cars around you are real and you don't want to bump into any of them. When you're meditating, nothing is real. Everything is empty, and you can just observe it and treat it as if it's completely empty. And this, eventually, we want to develop the range and the depth of the different ways of looking. And we can then appropriately pick up the lens that matches the situation. So what I'd say is, actually, in meditation, or in times where you can safely do these sorts of mental movements, you don't actually want to assume that there is anything out there. You just want to focus on what you are perceiving is an appearance, and that appearance is fabricated by the mind. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great. The only not necessarily tweak, when we use words like fabricate and hallucinate, it has a slightly it has a connotation of being maybe untrue. Whereas I'm just thinking about it now, and the way I'm starting to think about it is, it's not that it's hallucinatory or fabricating in a negative sense. It's just, this is a function of how the brain constructs reality through input through different senses. And that means necessarily that we can't perceive things as they are. Things out there are never as they are. They're as my brain knits together all the input from what I'm perceiving. So I think it's exactly the same. Just the wording. People might think that the wording is, somehow what we're experiencing is really false.
Yeah, that's good. If that's helpful. For some people, the false quality of it is actually quite useful. So Rob Burbea talks about this. He uses the word fabrication because it has implicit in it this sense that it is somehow made up, or it's being like, it's somehow deceptive. It ties into that idea of delusion. I also just wanted to mention, another word that gets used is concoction, which it may be more in line with what you're saying. It's like you're taking all the pieces and putting them together. Or maybe, fabrication in the sense of, you fabricate a house, you take all the elements of it and you build it up.
Yeah.
And the Pali word is sankhara, which is normally translated as formation. So that's another similar word. The other thing I wanted to mention is the science around this. What you were saying, that we can't actually know things out there without some degree of processing. The brain is processing it. And the science is sort of saying that if we were to experience the sensory world, in the scientific sense of like what has been observed in the sensory world, we're kind of shifting to a different lens here, different level. If we were to observe that without any pre-processing, we essentially wouldn't be able to do anything. So when we're walking around and looking at things, our brain is doing this pre-processing where it identifies objects and it selects out the things that are important. If we didn't do that, it would just be this like flat color. And we couldn't actually use that to navigate the world. But when we meditate, we can let go of the objects and we can let go of the significance of things. This gives us that range. So there's sort of different movements here depending on the situation.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Thanks, Richard.
May I say just one more thing?
Yeah, go for it, Frank.
Going back to Bahia, the Lord said to him, Bahia, in the seen, just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. He didn't tell Bahia to try to understand this empty thing, just do it. Like hearing or seeing, when it happens, the Burmese method is the simplest and the best way, labeling. Like now I speak, I hear myself speaking. I do not try to understand what's behind the speaking, just leaving the I out of this process of seeing. I might be wrong, but I'm a simple man without education.
No, that's great, Frank. Yeah, the labeling method, which was popularized by a number of different Burmese teachers, perhaps most famously Mahasi Sayadaw.
Yes.
This technique is great because it has a particular use, and this use is that we're inviting that part of the mind that is involved in conceptualization and labeling, but we're just asking it to do this work of noticing, discerning, and acknowledging. So we're not letting it build up into concepts. And if we practice this, it lets us drop down closer to that sensory experience. And so it has this way of cutting through what it is that we're experiencing. And yeah, as you said, Frank, it's not about thinking about it. It's not about pondering it or considering it. It's about experiencing it, seeing it over and over until you build up this confidence and assurance that you know what is there. This understanding builds over time, and it permeates the different layers of the mind.
Yes, you're right. Yes. Because the problem is with the I, the sense of I. We have to see that clearly. And with every minute of practice, the I is shrinking, shrinking. And on the end, when we really realize anatta, no self, disappears. Because this self is a delusion, but we still cling to it.
Yeah, I think I just want to add something there that yeah, I think it's the clinging that's the troublesome part. So, you know, when I listen to teachers that I think are, you know, really highly advanced, and I would include the Buddha in that as well. When I hear what the Buddha had to say, the Buddha still had personality. I mean, he was clearly very restrained and, you know, calm, and navigated things a certain way. But he also did at times get angry. He told people off when he needed to. He like responded to things in certain ways. And all the other teachers that I see, they still have like personality qualities. You know, they laugh, they, you know, have emotions and all this sort of thing. And they have actually a sense of what they like and what they don't. And so I just want to be clear here that the sense of self doesn't go away. There will still be a sense of self that arises, and there can still be a like healthy ego in some sense. So Jack Cornfield says that half the path is about seeing through the self, and the other half of the path is about cultivating a better sense of self. And so it's actually a very specific distinction I want to make here, that the ego and the sense of self, that healthy sense of self, that's actually not a problem. But what happens is that the ego comes in and takes credit for things that it doesn't, it has no claim to. And we get attached to that sense of that ego. We overly identify with certain things. And this is where it steps past the limits of what's appropriate. It exceeds its domain. So if we can actually just allow the sense of self to arise, but see its emptiness, see that it's dependent on causes and conditions, see that it's not permanent, that allows it to come and go freely. There's less friction, and we don't grab on, we don't cling, we don't become attached to it. And I think this is where there is this sense of freedom, while not just becoming a robot or a agent from the Matrix.
I haven't seen the movie, but you're right. Thanks.
I hope you watch it, Frank, and I hope you like it.
I'm going to now.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Well, this seems like a lovely place to finish. Thank you all for joining. It was really great to have you all here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being so patient and present. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you all have a good week. I have a couple of announcements that I should mention. Let me find this. So just a couple of events that are coming up. So there's a day of practice at the Buddhist library, and it's also hybrid, so it'll be online too. That's on the 28th of May. So Sunday in, what's that, 10 days, 11 days? There's only a few spots left for that. So I'm going to be teaching that. It's at the Buddhist Library. It's a joint event between Association of Engaged Buddhists and the Buddhist Library. There's only a few spots left. So if you're interested, please sign up. And also the weekends of practice have kicked off again. So Megan will be hosting that. That's 26th to 28th of May. And it's running sort of the last weekend of each month. So this is for AEB members. You can go to Vajrasalar and practice with others. You know, it would be a really lovely way to get a sort of weekend of practice in and enjoy Vajrasalar. It's such a beautiful place to spend time. So yeah, they're the announcements. Thank you all for coming. Hope you have a great week. I'll see you next time.